Hello everybody, welcome back to the Yotso Tech Tracks YouTube channel. Once again, you're joining me on a little discussion, and today's topic, let's talk a little bit about the suspension on this vehicle. Once again, this is a 2016 Ram 1500 pickup truck. It's a full-size Ram, crew cab, big doors, V8 Hemi, automatic transmission, four-wheel drive. However, the basic design is the same, whether you get a regular cab, quad cab, crew cab, short bed, long bed, two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, etc. This vehicle particular, in modern pickup trucks, this is the first one to use four-wheel coil spring suspension. It does have front independent suspension and a live axle at the rear. Both two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive Rams in this generation use coil springs front and rear. And the rear is a 5-link suspension. It has 4 trailing arms for locating the axle and keeping axle wrap under control, and it has a lateral link, which is also called a panhard rod, that is going to position the axle laterally and to make sure it doesn't shift around from left to right. It is a very good design. The links are very long, and once again, I came from a Jeep Wrangler previously, 2011 JK, and this one compared to that suspension is very similar. This suspension has its roots all the way back to the 1993 Jeep Grand Cherokee, which my family did have a 1995 Jeep Grand Cherokee once, and I'm very familiar with this type of suspension. FCA, Chrysler Jeep at the time, they came out with this 5-link suspension. That Jeep Grand Cherokee had a solid axle front and rear, and also used 5 links in the front, 5 links in the rear. Just talking about the rear suspension, it originated for the 1993 Jeep Grand Cherokee, and from then it went on to the Jeep TJs, then the Jeep JKs, and similar vehicles use similar designs. Now this truck, compared to my 2011 Jeep JK Wrangler, it has a similar setup at the back, where it's a live axle. It has 4 trailing links, 2 on each side, to mount the axle and to control movement, to prevent axle wrap, and so on. And it has 1 panhard rod. It's a lateral link going from basically one side of the vehicle. It's mounted to the frame. The other one is mounted right on the axle. That one keeps the axle from shifting left to right. And it is very, very simple design, very good design. It soaks up bumps very nicely. I found this truck has very smooth riding springs from the factory, which is one of the reasons I am not going to switch out any of the coil springs just yet. If you may or may not know, this truck is going to get a small lift very soon in the summer. I am piecing together a suspension for it. I looked into a lot of different options as far as my best bang for the buck, what is out there, and pros and cons to everything, of course. Let me just say, I'm not trying to build a show truck. This is not going to be a SEMA truck with a 6-inch, 8-inch, or 9-inch lift. I'm just looking for a little bit higher ground clearance from this vehicle, because I've noticed these 4th generation Rams do tend to sit very close to the ground. They are very car-like from the factory. It's very easy to get into. They do have about, I believe, 9 inches of suspension travel front and rear, or thereabouts, and it rides very smoothly. However, for my needs, the ground clearance is very low to the front, especially in the front end. It does have a chin spoiler, which is under the bumper, is just a big plastic fascia. It's good for aerodynamics and basically to make sure not too much wind gets underneath the vehicle. From the factory, the less aerodynamic turbulence you have under the truck, the better. However, I'm not chasing fuel economy numbers on the highway. Basically, I would like a little bit extra ground clearance. So once again, going back to what I'm trying to do with this, it's nothing more than about a 2, 3, maybe 3.5-inch lift. And I've done a lot of research regarding this vehicle. The front independent suspension is a really nice design. It has very long arms at the bottom. It is basically, you have an upper A-arm and a lower A-arm. And it's a very nice riding vehicle. The lower control arm is an aluminum alloy, and so is the steering knuckle. The top control arm is stamped steel. It does have a little bit of a weak link with the ball joints, as many people may or may not know in these vehicles. The upper control arms do have a very limited range of motion. When you do raise these vehicles, even 2 inches or so, for example, you put a spacer under the front coilover. If you remove the coilover, put a 2-inch spacer on it, you're basically going to make that suspension travel in a geometry it was not designed to. So in my research, I have looked for an upper control arm. I have gone to a Procom, I believe, Pro Runner control arm. It's also on my website. If anybody's interested, you can check that out. The reasons why I like them, I've gone into them. Please check it out. It's got good information on it. And from there, the 2-inch lift I'm looking for is pretty much the maximum I'm willing to go with, because the front suspension has limitations, as I said, with the upper ball joint, which I have addressed with that control arm. However, the next thing that is going to be binding is going to be the CV drive shafts. Again, these drive shafts are pretty much the same in all independent suspension vehicles with a front axle shaft through them. It has CV joints, inner and outer, and those joints are covered with basically a plastic, rubber, or a silicone boot. It keeps the grease inside, it keeps everything lubricated inside. However, when you get into those larger angles, those boots are going to be flexing a lot more and rubbing on each other, and you're going to shorten the life. Now, I understand this. As I mentioned in previous videos, I'm a technician and I have no problem working on these things. It's not a major issue for myself, even if it's something that I have to take apart at 100,000 kilometers or so. I'm expecting so much life out of them, which is no problem, because those drive shafts, roughly in any average vehicle, they can last about 250,000 kilometers, and just being proactive and removing that is not a big deal for me. Parts are very cheap for this vehicle, which is one of the reasons I'm interested in these Rams. I live in North America, in Canada, and dealer networks for this vehicle are extensive, coast to coast. Anywhere you go, you can find parts for them, no problem. It's under warranty still, so the major issues, if I do have any, it's not a problem finding a service center. And that is one of the reasons a 2-inch lift is gonna suit my needs. Furthermore, regarding suspension lift kits, there are so many out there, I don't even know where to begin. But when you get into about a 2 or 3-inch lift, it is nothing more than basically an upper control arm with coil spring spacers, or a longer suspension shock absorber. In this vehicle, you can choose your ride height based on a small collar that you can adjust, and you can increase the spring tension on the front, the spring rate. So it is very easy, simple design to lift the vehicle. However, to do it properly, to make sure that in the future you don't run into issues about component failure regarding ball joints, you don't want to go over 2 inches or 3 inches or thereabouts. The next set of lift kits do have drop brackets, which for different reasons I don't want to get into. The main reason is when you lift the vehicle, you're increasing the angle of all the steering and suspension components. Up to a point, you can get away with it. However, when you get into extreme angles, for example, if you try to put on a 4-inch or 5-inch lift, everything would be maxed out regarding binding of the ball joints, tie rod ends, CV drive shafts, and so on and so forth. So what manufacturers do, aftermarket manufacturers, is they drop the cradle down to get those suspension components and steering components more parallel. However, one issue with that is, if you're raising the vehicle and you have to put in those brackets, you're automatically going to be losing ground clearance under the front cross members. So it defeats the purpose. You do get the belly higher. However, when you look underneath the truck from the front, going to a 4-inch lift also means some of those kids are going to drop those cross members 4 inches down. So you're not gaining anything, you're not losing anything, except for perhaps you're able to put a larger tire under the wheel well. However, there's a lot of information out there on the internet. These trucks, you can get away with up to 37-inch tires if you're very careful with fender trimming, inner fender trimming. You have to massage a little bit of plastic trims here and there. However, even on a 2 or 3 inch lift, you can get away with putting in a 37-inch tire. So I don't see the need to put on a 4-inch or 6-inch lift. And one of the other main reasons I don't want to go with those lift kits is because they do weigh quite a lot. Now this vehicle has around a 15 or 1600 pound payload capacity, and anything you increase you put on the vehicle, you're reducing your maximum payload capacity. So some of those 4-inch or 6-inch lift kits that delete the aluminum steering knuckles and they put on these massive suspension cradles and drop brackets and all that stuff, they do weigh around 200 pounds, which is something I want to avoid. I want to keep the suspension as light as possible. For example, unsprung weight, which is the steering knuckle, lower control arms. There is a mathematical calculation regarding unsprung weight, but they do count as half unsprung. And once you get into removing lightweight components and putting on very heavy components such as cast iron steering knuckles and heavy duty brackets and so on and so forth, you do end up losing a lot of the steering feel, and basically the ride and handling of the vehicle is going to be different than how it is. And I really gone to like this vehicle over the past 20,000 kilometers. Honestly, it is the best full-size pickup truck as far as handling goes in my experience. It rides very nicely. It is very car-like. And since I've gone with these Goodyear Wrangler Duratrack tires, they are a 33-inch equivalent on this truck. I believe 285 70 17-inch. It roughly translates into a 33-inch diameter tire. I do have a significantly large sidewall, so this truck soaks up bumps like a Cadillac. That's just a saying, but it's very smooth. It's very stable. The front independent suspension is great as far as road holding, soaking up bumps. I'm not sure if you can hear noise in the background. That is just clunking from, I have all kinds of stuff here in the car, but the suspension is smooth as butter, and I want to keep it that way. So the 2-inch lift I'm looking into is going to complement this truck in a little bit as far as ground clearance goes, going into off-road situations, in campsites, overland travel, off the grid, going to beaches, sand, dirt, mud, gravel roads, all that stuff. If you can get the truck a little bit higher, less chance of scraping, less chance of getting hung up. And in the summertime when the weather is nice, I will make a lot of videos regarding the homemade camper trailer I have. That is also designed with very high ground clearance for those reasons. I don't like to scrape anything on the bottom, get hung up, get caught, and the less damage I can do underneath the vehicle, the better. So 2 inches, along with the slightly larger than factory diameter tire, is going to have an extra maybe 2 to 4 inches of ground clearance at the bottom end of the truck, which is pretty much exactly where I want to be. Again, this is not a rock crawler. It's not designed to be. If you're looking for something that's more into an off-road rock crawler type vehicle, probably Jeeps are the best bet. This is a full-size pickup truck. It is wide, it is heavy. I don't actually want to drive this into places that a two-door Jeep JK Wrangler might have gone. That vehicle is very nimble, very lightweight compared to this, very maneuverable. I had a two-door, so the short wheelbase was very easy to manage, and I can turn around like a forklift basically. And this truck is just going to be basically going from camp spots to camp spots, mountain travel, off-road travel, which is fine, but nothing extreme that I would need anything larger. Again, this truck never had a limited slip differential front or rear, and I'm not looking to tear into the axles to get into those traction aids. It does have a fairly decent traction control system, and in low range that system works very well. If one wheel starts to slip on one axle, the traction control system automatically tries to brake it and send power to the other side. So even though it has front and rear open differentials, because it has the BorgWarner 44-45 part-time transfer case, the center differential, as you can imagine, it's not really differential, but it is always locked when you go into four-wheel drive, whether it's high or low. That means it is fairly good to go off-road. This is the vehicle to get if you do have these off-road travels in mind. For now, I'm really happy with the ride-up handling of this vehicle. Like I said, it has coil spring suspension, 4 corners. It is very smooth, even on rough roads that I'm driving on now. These are very, very old, semi-maintained roads with a lot of potholes, and driving the vehicle, I can hardly feel anything. The seat is very cushy in this truck. The springs are very soft, which is really, really nicely done from the factory. In the rear, again, if you may or may not have watched the other videos, I do have a little bit of information about. I have gone with Firestone HD airbags that go right inside the coil springs. I still do have the rear coil springs. However, because I'm carrying, let's say 50% capacity payload at any given time with all the gear I have in the truck, I do air the rear airbags up to about 20-25 pounds per square inch, just riding normally. And those heavy-duty airbags from Firestone, they can handle up to 60 pounds per square inch. That means for any sag that might come with added load on this vehicle, I can just air it up and have a nice level ride anytime with any situation. I do enjoy those airbags a lot because it is not a full air ride suspension. It doesn't delete the coil springs, which is something that if you do have any experience with full air ride suspensions, any failure of a full air suspension is going to be pretty much make the vehicle undrivable or very difficult to drive, especially if you're carrying a lot of weight, pulling a trailer, and things like that. If you have a full air suspension, if you have an airbag go, an airline, any kind of an O-ring, compressor, usually the vehicle will lose all air, and basically you're going to be riding on the bump stocks, which is, you can get away with if you're not loaded just to drive to the service center. However, Murphy's Law, worst case situation, bad things happen at the worst time. So I wanted to keep those rear coil springs still to have a mechanical suspension, and that is one of the reasons I never looked into having an air ride option from this factory. I know these Ram trucks do have a 4-corner air suspension, which is really nice for what it is. You can adjust the ride height on the highway. It does lower the height to give you a little bit more aerodynamics. I believe it has off-road settings. I never drove one of those, but every review I've read or watched on the internet says it is a great system. However, when those systems do fail, it can be pricey and complicated, and it's just one more issue to go along, which is why this truck is exactly or almost exactly how I prefer to spec out the vehicle. Just a simple, reliable engine, transmission, transfer case, mechanical suspension with coil springs are nice. It has a very strong frame. The vehicle is very well insulated. It is very quiet. It has a lot of sound deadening. It is my favorite truck, and I'm sure a lot of people agree with that. Again, I have no brand loyalty against Chevrolet, Ford. I've gone into videos where I've mentioned I do have in the past trucks from all the major 3 manufacturers. I had a GMC full-size pickup truck that was a 2500 diesel, and also a 5-liter Coyote F-150. I like all those trucks, but in my opinion, this one is the best suiting my needs. It is large, comfortable, smooth, decent fuel economy, and it should be very reliable if you keep up with the maintenance, just like anything. So I guess that's it for today. That was just a little discussion regarding the suspension on this truck. It is hopefully going to be a very reliable setup for my needs, and any updates on this truck I will post, good or bad. How it's going to be down the road, I don't know. I'm hoping for the best. So far, with 20,000 plus kilometers on it, it is nothing but bulletproof. I hope to get years and years out of service out of it, and share my experience with the community to help anybody who's looking for these trucks. I can give my honest opinion. I choose just to put everything out there. Honest opinion. I have no brand loyalty against any manufacturer. Once again, this truck I've gone because of a lot of research, and for what it is and the amount of money you spend on one of these trucks, it is a very, very good option for anybody who has a family, who has carry a little trailer. Payload capacity is decent, very comfortable, very smooth. There's a lot of options regarding powertrains, and you can get from the base models like I have all the way up to $60,000, $70,000 half-ton trucks, which have all the bells or whistles. So there's something for everybody. Anyway, thank you for watching. Once again, I have to go to work, so I have to cut the video short, and I will see you all next time on the Untitled Chapter YouTube channel. Give it a thumbs up, let me know if you have any questions or comments, and subscribe. There's going to be a lot more content coming to this channel as soon as I can. So thank you, take care, and goodbye.